Hi guys, welcome back to a new video. If you are new here, hello, my name is Aziza. I am a full-time working mom and I share a lot about my life as a working mom and also living in my mid-30s right here on my channel. So if you're new, I hope you consider subscribing, and if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back. So in today's video, it's going to be a little bit different. I wanted to do a little sit-down video because I wanted to review all of the books that I read in 2023. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the video. So the first book that I read is Sally Rooney, Beautiful World, Where Are You? I think the reason why I didn't have a good reading year last year is because of this book. This book was the first book that I read in 2023, and it was actually carried over from 2022 because that's when I went to Malaysia for our end of the year vacation with my family, and I remember getting this when I was in Singapore. So I grabbed this book. I love the cover art and everything. I started reading it and it was really slow. Just a quick synopsis on what it is. It's basically about two friends, okay? Two ladies who are friends. They were pretty close, but then now they live in like separate places. One of the friend, like one girl, she's an author. She's a best-selling author. She lives a more like vibrant life in a bigger city. And then the other girl, who is kind of like the main character in this book, she is sort of like she lives a more quieter life. She's more like an admin assistant or something like that in a regular 9-to-5. She doesn't really have like a boasting career or anything like that. But in the story, it talks about how she met this other guy and kind of like her relationship with that person. And then throughout this entire book, she's always writing to her friend, the author, and they would exchange these letters to one another. And then also the friend also met another guy and they kind of have their own relationship. And then towards like the end of the book, these two couples basically came together. Like the author friend and her boyfriend came over to visit the girl and the other guy. And yeah, I just don't know how I felt about the book. The writing is not like my writing style. I don't really vibe with that. It's just too long-winded. Like it takes a long time for the author to kind of get to the point, but she writes beautifully, like very beautiful like prose, sentences, very verbose. But for the story, I didn't really like it. Also, I didn't really fall in love with any of the characters. Usually a good book for me would mean the characters are someone that I connected with, or even if I don't connect with like on a relevancy level, it's more so just like I connected with them because I feel something for them. For this, I didn't really feel anything. So because of that, I gave this book a 3-star. Sorry. Okay, so the second book that I read is an audiobook. So it was 13 Things Mentally Strong Parents Don't Do. So the reason why I bought this book is because I read this book, which is 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do, and I really enjoyed this book, so I wanted to read like the parent version. So I listened to this audiobook and it was not bad. I went through it pretty quickly and I really did. Actually, let me take that back. I actually thought it was really good because I did rate it as a 5-star. It had a lot of things on there that was very invaluable when it comes to like being a better parent. The reason why I picked it up is because I was having like a really hard time dealing with my son at the time. I wanted to be better equipped at like handling him, and I just bought this book on a whim because I was feeling so desperate. But yeah, I ended up really enjoying it. So if you are a parent and you want something to listen to or read, I definitely recommend that book. I would say also that the book was narrated by the author, and she was a pretty good narrator too. So if you wanted to do it on audio, I definitely do recommend. Okay, so the third book that I read in 2023 is also one of the reasons why I had a slower reading year last year, and that is because of this book, Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. Here is what I have to say about this book. Just a quick background. The story is about a girl. She was supposed to get married, but then she ended up leaving her husband or fiance at the altar, and she just ran away. She kind of found herself in this situation where her sister ran away and left her child behind, basically. So what ended up happening is she had to step in and take care of her niece. Now it turns out her sister is actually her twin sister, and so they look the same, except she's more of like the polished city girl. She has like an amazing career, and she was gonna marry this like really rich guy, and then she left him to come back to this town called Knock Me Out, okay? And she was entangled in the situation where her sister, which is the opposite version of her, very rundown, not rundown, but she's just like not as polished as she is, and always gets into trouble in the small town. So everybody knew the sister because she's always doing things around town that is not great. So she has a really bad reputation. And then the polished sister, I forgot their names. What is her name? Naomi. And so she had to take care of her niece. So it was really cute in the sense where like she was trying to figure out her life. So while she was there, she had to kind of like rebuild her life all over again while taking care of the niece, and she had to kind of build the relationship with the niece. And then of course there's always the guy, right? So the guy there, she couldn't stand him, or they always fighting with each other, but he's like supposed to be like really, really hot. And so they ended up like, not to spoil anything, but you can probably guess what happened. So yeah, so it was good in the sense it's very cutesy kind of book, but man, the names in here are a mouthful. So yeah, and it's a pretty thick book, like over 500 pages. It's not that bad, but the way it was hyped, I thought it was going to be like so much better, but it was a-okay. So yeah, I gave this I think about like a 4-star, and maybe sometime this year I'll grab the second book in the trilogy. It's a trilogy, so I'm probably gonna grab the second book and see if I like it or not. The next book that I read was an audiobook, and it is, gosh, this is so bright. It is Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey, and I love this book. I thought this book was just so, let me just start. I'm already like in love with Matthew McConaughey. I think he's just such a cool, he has this very like cool, like suave character, and I just love his like Texan accent, and I fell even more in love with him after reading this book, or like listening to this book. So he narrated his own book, which was even more like the cherry on top, because he's like reading the story to us, and it sounds like he's actually like talking to us. So it was just amazing in that way. And the book is actually not that long, so it's only 6 hours and 42 minutes, so it's actually not that bad. And I love the whole concept around green lights. So there's a whole message behind the green light thing, and it's not just a title, an arbitrary title, but essentially what it is he talks about in life there are going to be your green light moments or your red light moments. So in this case he talks about different paths that he took within his life, kind of like from starting in his like childhood, then his young adulthood, you know, becoming an actor, so on and so forth, until who he is now, how he became a dad, a husband, and all of that stuff. And he was met with a lot of like red light moments, or like yellow light moments, or green light moments. A lot of times he said that people always want to go for the green light moments, and then when they're reaching like a red light moment or a yellow light moment, what does that mean? So before, when you get to a red light, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going the wrong way. It just means that you're just taking a pause in your journey, right? So in that moment when you're at your red light, you have to evaluate to see which road you want to take. Do you want to turn right? Do you want to turn left? So it gives you that moment to kind of reassess where you want to go and pivot, or you can just stop and wait and just continue on, right? So I really love that whole notion around like red light, yellow light, green light, because it's very relatable. You know, even in my day-to-day, sometimes I reach a yellow light moment where like I don't know what I need to do. I need to slow down a little bit and just kind of see where I'm going, and then when I do hit the red light, which 2023 definitely I definitely met a lot of red light moments, I was able to kind of like take a step back and like write down and just internalize like what I want to do or like where I want to go, and it's pretty beneficial. So I really did like that. And like I said, also it's kind of like a memoir, or actually it is a memoir. So he talks about like how he basically became who he is. He had a lot of like travel stories, and he went through a lot, which is actually really interesting. And then kind of moving along to his career, like, you know, how he was very much like entrenched within the rom-com world. He loved working in rom-com, but as a marketing person myself, he talked about like rebranding himself to a bigger actor like he was when he got his big break in like Dallas Buyer Cowboys, or Dallas Buyers Club, or is it Buyers Club? I can't remember the name of the story. That one, and then also Lincoln Lawyer. So it was really interesting to kind of like hear what steps he had to do, which was what he called like his red light moment, to kind of like reinvent himself as an actor. So that was fun. And then of course, with a great book, there's always a little bit of a love story in there. The whole story around like how he met Camilla and how he met the kids, or how they had the kids. That was all amazing. So if you like Matthew McConaughey, definitely recommend checking this book out. Book number 5 is this book called Go Back to Where You Came From, and it's by Wajahat Ali. So I actually started reading this book in 2022 for a book club at work. I am part of the AAPI Employee Resource Group, which is Asian American Pacific Islander group. So for book club, what we did was we read a book by an Asian author, and Wajahat Ali is Southeast Asian, or not Southeast Asian, but he's Asian, and he wrote this book. This is actually fairly new. I think it was published in like probably 2022 or like 2021, somewhere around there. But I never actually finished reading it completely, so I just kind of picked up where I stopped within this book and then continued reading in 2023. So this book was actually pretty good. It was not that bad, and it actually talked a lot about him growing up being Indian and being Indian American, how he kind of went through, you know, his life through college and stuff like that, especially during the 9/11 incident, or like after 9/11 incident, being Muslim and being brown in America. So he kind of wrote it in the sense where like, these are the ways you're supposed to be more American. And it was really interesting because for each of those separate sections, he had like a little anecdote or a little story that kind of like talks about the specific lesson. So it was interesting in that sense. I related quite a lot in the sense that, you know, with like the Asian culture, there's a lot of similarities regardless of like which Asian country you're from. So I related a lot on that aspect, but I also related the most from being a Muslim perspective. So it was just really interesting in the sense that like I related a lot to that. But as you can see, like I don't remember exactly like what happened in here, but I thought it was interesting and relevant for me. So yeah, I think for this I gave it like a 3.5 to 4 stars. So yeah, it's quite interesting actually. If you're interested to learn more about this, then I recommend picking it up. Oh my gosh, you guys, so this is the next book that I read. I think this is the 6th book. Yes, this is the 6th book of the year, and I love this book so much. So this one is called Last Tang Standing, and I actually forgot what it was about, and I had to like read the back. and then I realized that like, oh my gosh, I love this book so much last year. So this is actually a really good book if you're into like romance and stuff like that. But I bought it the same time I bought this book, which was when I was in Singapore in December of 2022. So I bought this and I loved it because why? Number one, it is set in Singapore, so a lot of stories that's kind of like set in Singapore or about Singaporeans are mostly always about Malaysians as well. So if you've read the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy, it's kind of like that same vibe, right? And even though Crazy Rich Asians was like based in Singapore, but there's a lot of scenes or parts of the book that were in Malaysia. So I really love that. And obviously like our language is kind of like similar, so I really like the whole vibe, right? And being Malaysian, like I ship it, like I love it. So this book is about this woman, her name is Andrea. She is like in her mid-30s and she has like, of course, like the amazing career. She's a lawyer, she's about to become partner, and she lives in this really nice condo. She has like really nice things, you know, you think about like your typical like Singaporean woman, very luxurious lifestyle, but the only thing is she is not married. Ding ding ding. So obviously her mom and like her aunts and stuff are like always pressuring her into like, when are you gonna get married? So this book is essentially about her. She spends a lot of time with her cousin, her cousin does not get a lot of heat for not getting married because her cousin is like half Chinese, so she kind of gets away with it a little bit, but because she is like full-on Chinese, like she gets like a lot of heat from her parents, her mom especially, for not being married. So she's kind of like trying to find a man basically. So it's really interesting because like in her law firm she works with this guy, and this guy and her became really close friends. And yeah, in the same time she is trying to like find a man so that she can prove to her mom. So obviously like something happens there, but the ending was so good. Like it was so good. And this book, characters, I loved all the characters. I loved it. And yeah, I highly recommend reading this book, especially if you read Crazy Rich Asians or watched that movie. If you want like a lighthearted like romance type of novel that's based in Southeast Asia, this is your book. I gave this a 5 stars. Okay, so book number 7. Yes, book number 7 is, okay, book number 7, there you go, is The Dutch House. And it's by N. Patchett. Patchett? Okay. And this was also read via audio or listened via audio, and it was narrated or is narrated by Tom Hanks. I really liked this book. I really liked this book. However, it is very long, like very long. I think the entire book was about 11 plus hours or like 10 hours, somewhere around there. And that's a lot of driving. So I only do my audiobooks in the car. Sometimes I will try to like listen to my audiobook when I'm like doing chores and stuff, but I prefer like watching videos when I'm doing chores, so I don't do it all the time. So that's the reason why it took me like a really long time to finish this book. But I really did enjoy it. The story is about the Dutch house. So it's about this house, right? And it's like a really grandiose house, absolutely beautiful. The way they described it in the book, it's like kind of like a glass house almost, you can kind of see in, and it has a lot of stories kind of like tied to this house. So it's actually about a family, a story about family relationships, a relationship between a brother and sister, so like sibling relationship, which I really loved. It talked about basically, just a quick synopsis, there's this boy, he's kind of like the narrator, right? And he's the main character. He moved into this house with his dad and his mom and his sister, and this house is kind of like purchased by the dad, who was not rich but became very rich because he was like a real estate like developer investor. This is like back in like the olden days, okay? So then they moved into this house. Unfortunately, something happened where like the mom like ran away. Okay, the mom ran away, like basically abandoned them, like him, his sister, and the dad in this house, and like she wanted to like live her own life. So her mom his mom was gone. So then now it's a story about him. He grew up very close with his sister. They have an okay relationship with the dad, but it became bad in the sense where like his dad then decided to remarry. So the stepmom was in the picture, and the stepmom moved into the house and had 2 other daughters, right? So it talks about that kind of whole, like his whole childhood, like how that all came about. And then also talks about like how his relationship with the sister kind of went or evolved from the time they were living inside the house to like after. It's just such a beautiful book. Like she has a way with like talking about each of the different characters in such a nice way. And yeah, it was really sad too in a lot of parts. So I'm trying to like explain this book without telling too much, but if you really love family dynamics and that kind of like drama with the stepmom and all of that, I definitely do recommend checking it out, because it is such a good book and such a nice story, and sad, but it had a pretty good outcome in the end. I definitely recommend checking that out. For that one, I gave it a 5 stars also. So awesome. And Tom Hanks was great in that book. Okay guys, the next book that I read, I think it's book number 8 now, is, but here you go, is Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. So that is the book that I read. And okay, I am such a Colleen Hoover fan, and I don't want to be this way, because I feel like every single book of hers that I read, I always give it a 5 star. And this book is not that much different. I gave it a 5 stars too. I love this book. And a lot of like, I have friends on like Goodreads, I see their ratings, and like most people just like rated it like a 4 star, but I gave it a 5 stars. Maybe I'm just generous in like how I rate my books, but I love it because, number one, the reason why I love this story in this book is because for me, what makes a good book is a book that is very easy to read. Not just easy to read, but it has a really nice flow. And Colleen Hoover, her writing style is very simple, okay? She's not like Sally Rooney in the sense where like, does not use like long verbose words, sentences. Hers is very like to the point, and even with it being so succinct and simple, it is able to deliver just so many different emotions because of the way it flows. Like she has her way with like making the story flow from one scene to the other, one point to the next, in a way that is really nice as a reader to be able to kind of like go through. Number 2, what I really like about her books is that she always has unpredictable sort of like storyline. So there's always like a twist in the book that really, as a reader, like it keeps you going, like you want to know where it like leads to the next scene. So that's the reason why I really like that. Number 3, characters are so important to me in determining the greatness of a book. So character development is so important, and I want to be able to like feel connected to the characters, even if I cannot relate to them 100%. Like you just want to empathize with them, right? So Colleen Hoover has a way of writing sad stories, man, like really sad stories, but like love stories. Okay, it's so great. And this book is no less. So this book is about a mom and a daughter. Okay, so basically mom and daughter, like how they navigated their relationship. What happened was, unfortunately, there was a tragic accident that happened to members in their family. So the dad, right, and somebody else. I'm not gonna give too much, but there's like a tragic accident that happened, leaving the dad to be dead. And so she had to navigate her relationship with her daughter, Sierra, who was just having a really hard time dealing with this death. And she's a teenager, and she's like being very rebellious against the mom, right? And it's really interesting as a mom, like reading this now, like I relate more to the mom than the kid. But yeah, she was kind of like dealing through that. But the reason why the daughter is the way the daughter is because she doesn't know the full truth around like why the mom is a certain way. So the mom also found comfort in this other guy. Okay, let me just tell you. So the other person that died was her sister, okay? So the dad, which is her husband, and the sister died in an accident together. And so the sister was dating this other guy, and the other guy and the mom basically, like, they had to kind of like come together to, like, you know, like comfort the girl, whatever. And they're still trying to like navigate like their own losses too. Like, they're also grieving their relationships, right? So it was really interesting to read because there's a huge twist in this book, you guys, and it is so freaking sad. Like, it's so sad, but in the end it was a really, really good outcome. As any great stories do, they always have good outcomes. Even if it's not like a happy, positive outcome, it has to have a good outcome, right? And this one did, and I can assure you that if you want something that is gonna pull at your heartstrings and that is also like a fast read, I definitely recommend reading Colleen Hoover's book. I enjoyed it so much and I gave it a 5 stars. Okay, so book number 9 now. This is another book that I read. So I read it on my Kindle, so I read it as an ebook, and it's called The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins. I'll put the picture here because it's going to be too bright for me to show on the screen. But it's called The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins, and I love this book. I loved it, but I gave it like a 4 star. So like I thought it was great. I thought that it was kind of like a, if you enjoyed Verity by Colleen Hoover, it gives, like, this book gives Verity vibes. Okay, so I thought it was really good. It's kind of like a suspense thriller sort of book. It's about this girl who started off, she's a nanny in like a really luxurious like neighborhood, like a typical neighborhood, like Stepford Wives or like Real Housewives type of scenario, right? So she is a nanny in one of those like neighborhoods, and then there was news that one of the ladies that owns this beautiful house, like, she had died, and so she left her husband, basically was still living in the house, and basically this nanny and him started like forming some sort of relationship. It was really interesting because like she really wanted to like fit in, and she kind of does all these things, the different like ladies in the neighborhood, and all this while that there's like a backstory that's happening that I can't tell you because it would give it away. But it was so interesting because there's a twist there that I did not expect. And yeah, it really definitely just kept me on my toes. So if you enjoy kind of like a murder thriller sort of book, then I definitely do recommend it. And especially if you enjoy Colleen Hoover's Verity, like I said, it gives off that vibe, but not exactly like it. So it's not like a dupe of that. It definitely isn't. It's completely different because it has that, like I said, the little like Real Housewives sort of like drama like infused in it, but with Verity vibes. Like, yeah, it's good. So I definitely recommend checking that out. Okay, book number 11. This one is called Sarong Party Girls by Cheryl Lu-Tien. So I bought this book a while ago, and I actually got this from I want to say I got this from like a Goodwill or something like that. It literally took me so long to open this book up, and guys, this was actually like a pleasant surprise because it gives this vibes, because it's also set in Singapore. So apparently I read a lot of books that's kind of like set in Singapore this year, but Sarong Party Girls is so cute because it's about a story about a Singaporean girl who loves to party, and she is obsessed again with like being Singaporean, Chinese and all of that. Like they're always getting pressured by their moms to get married, and she's kind of getting in that age where she needs to like get married because everybody else around her are getting married, but she doesn't want to marry just anybody. She wants to marry a white guy. Okay, so they are called SPGs because these SPGs, they go to specific bars in Singapore where there's more expats, and she's trying to find a way to marry like an expat guy because they want to have their little Chanel babies, is what she calls them, which is like your mixed baby. So yeah, it was really funny in the sense because it was her, and like she tried to recruit like her close friends to kind of go find these guys, and they're literally in this book, it talks about like they're on a mission to find these guys. So yeah, it was really interesting in the sense that like how the stories came about, but at the same time, you're just kind of like sitting there, like you just want to like shake her and be like, oh my gosh, like stop partying so much. And some of the stuff that she does in this book is super questionable, like very questionable, and there are a lot of like backbiting and just in the pursuit of finding this like guy, right? Super desperate. Just think of her like being super desperate, right? In the end, like I'm not gonna give the end away, but in the end, like it's like she got what she kind of like asked for, and yeah, it was an okay book. I really do like how it's kind of like set in Singapore, because like I said, I'm from Malaysia. The one thing that's really cool about this book is that it's actually written in like Singlish. So if you're not like a native person reading this book, so like if you don't speak like Singaporean or Malaysian, it's gonna be hard to kind of like follow along, because the way she writes this book is in Singlish. Like think broken English, okay? So this book is not really written in like the perfect English, but it's written that way because she's trying to give the essence of who these SPGs are. So it's kind of like that, but there's some words in here that's for sure in like our slang, and maybe you would not get that because she doesn't have a page on here that kind of like explains to you what the slang means. So that's one thing. And the story is funny. This character is very desperate. The ending was like, okay. So I think for this one, I gave it like a 3 to 3.5 stars. But for the purpose of it being like Singaporean, written in that slang and everything, I thought it was pretty interesting and pretty funny. So yeah. Okay, so that book was actually my 10th book of the year, and this next one is my 11th book of the year. Gosh, I don't know. I'm just like all over the place right now. So the 11th book that I read was also a Kindle book, and it was the Moms on Call book. If you follow my vlogs, you know that I had a baby last year, or like I gave birth to my 3rd baby. And so with every time I give birth, I always read some sort of like baby-centric book. I read Baby Wise when I gave birth to my 2nd one, and this time I reread the Moms on Call book, and I didn't really like it. It was I don't know why people hype it up so much. It wasn't that good. It wasn't new information. It was literally a book about people who do not know anything about babies. So if you're an experienced mom and you have another pregnancy, you don't have to read it, because it really talks about like basic stuff like how to change diapers and everything. So a lot of those sections, like I skipped everything, and the only thing that I bought this book for is for this schedule, like the Moms on Call schedule, which actually you can Google them online. Yeah, it was alright. It's like a 2-3 stars. I mean, I give it a 3 stars because like I am an experienced mom, and I know a lot of the baby like basic stuff, but yeah, it wasn't like mind blown or anything like that. And it's really expensive. Okay, this book, I bought the ebook version. It was like $20-something, okay? And get this book that I got is only for 0 to 6 months, and there's like 3 books basically for the Moms on Call bundle, and they're each like $20-30-something, which is crazy expensive. So it's alright. I don't really recommend it because I didn't really learn too much from it. Okay guys, this is book number 12. This is called What Happened to You? Conversations in Trauma, Resilience, and Healing. And this book is by Bruce D. Perry and Oprah Winfrey. So this book was interesting. It was a lot. I enjoyed this book. I learned a lot. It's very scientific. I don't know if scientific is a good word, but let me just kind of explain this book a little bit. It's just essentially a book about like trauma, like what happens during trauma, like how the brain reacts, and it's just kind of like how we heal from trauma and build resilience from it. It's called Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing because it literally is a conversation. So this book is written out in interview format, and interview format, Oprah, goes hand in hand. Oprah is asking Bruce Perry, who is a neuroscientist. Is that the word? He's like a brain expert, right? He's a brain expert that has a lot of work done within trauma healing and all of that, so he has a lot of experience and he's done a lot of research. So really good information on here around like why we are the way we are, like what makes our belief system and then you add that with like the trauma or like experiences that you kind of go through, and that really shapes us into who we are today. And so it really helps me understand, like, a lot of the times when people act badly, so to speak, instead of saying like, what is wrong with you, this book really made me change my perspective around like, wow, like what actually happened to you to make you be this way, you know? So it's really interesting because there's a lot of conversation on kids, for instance, who went through really hard times growing up, and a lot of children unfortunately suffer because of decisions that their parents make, and those kids, they turn out to kind of repeat the cycle, and it's all around like how their brain is programmed from when they were little. So it talks a lot about that. Like, it does talk a lot about that. The one thing that I got from it too is like, I feel that I became super paranoid after I read this book. Now, being a parent myself, I feel like, oh my gosh, like if I do something wrong to my child, like am I going to like scar him for life or scar her for life? Like they talk about like infants crying and like, you know, crying and not being picked up. The infant will go into like flight or fight mode, and that's not good because it activates like the stressor perceptors and, you know, all these things. So I'm definitely not the best person to explain it, but I feel like if you do read this book, you're gonna get a different perspective. For me, it really just that question around, you know, like what's wrong with you, to like what happened to you, to try to understand why someone is behaving a certain way. I think it's really interesting. So yeah, not a bad read. I think this one I gave it like a 4-star because it is super like scientific sometimes, and it was a little bit hard for me to get through in that kind of aspect. Oh my gosh, so, you guys, I think we're on book 13, but let me get some water. Okay, book 13, or whatever number this book is Spare by Prince Harry. Oh my goodness, guys, I wanted to hate this book so much, but I freaking love it. Like I fell for it. I don't know if I should say like I fell for it, but I actually did enjoy reading this book so much, and I feel for him. And I'm one of those people that is anti Prince Harry, anti like Meghan Markle and all of that, because I do feel like Meghan is very, like, she wants the attention on her. She is a pick me kind of person. She gives me up that vibe, and so I refused to watch the documentary because I saw some snippets on TikTok and I was like, oh, like I don't know if I want to like watch that. But then I read this book and I feel for Prince Harry. So basically, if you don't know about this book, it's just basically his like tell-all, like what really happened. So this is a good precursor to reading this book because we talk about like what happened to you. Boom, this this is exactly an example of what I read over here. He went through a lot of trauma, you know, with his mom passing and like how he had to grieve as a little boy, being royalty on top of that, having this like, he respects his father, but they don't really have a close-knit relationship. So as a child, when you're going through that huge moment where you lost your mom, he wasn't really allowed to talk about his mom, to grieve properly. Nobody in his family actually sat down and like really talked to him or even presented him the opportunity to see a therapist at the time, and that really like effed him over. He lost a lot of trust in a lot of people. He wrote a lot about his relationship, conversations with his dad and like his brother and with the queen that just passed, and it really gave me a different feeling about his life. Like it made me see him a little bit differently. And yeah, I really felt for it. I read this book really fast because he didn't write this himself. He used a ghostwriter, but it was really, really good. He's also he's a proud soldier. He talks a lot about his experience in the war. Of course, again, with any good book, there's always a good love story. So even though I feel like a certain kind of way for Meghan Markle, although I do feel like Meghan Markle is absolutely stunning, like I was actually like fangirling over her after I read this book. He talks about how he fell in love with her, how they met and everything. And it's just like, so this is how rich people meet, you know what I mean? And it's just like, rich and famous people meet, and he talks about her in a way that is really inspiring, and here's such an awesome love story. And he basically uprooted his entire life for this woman. So you guys can talk smack all you want about Prince Harry, but that man loves his wife, and he's willing to go through everything and anything so that she is happy. And that to me is a good husband and a good father, and because of that, I adore him. So highly recommend, 5 out of 5. The next book that I read, which is book 14, I think, is called Love and Other Words by Christina Morin. So this book, I bought it on Kindle. I read it when I was on my maternity leave, and it's all right. Like, it's okay. I gave it like a 4, like 3. I want to see, here's the thing with Goodreads, you can't really do 0.5 ratings, so I actually just wanted to give it like a 3.5 stars. It was certainly way overhyped in my opinion on TikTok or like Facebook and all of that. I thought it was just okay, and I love reading romance books and love stories. So basically this is about this woman. She is a doctor, and she lives in San Francisco too, also like another San Francisco type of book. But she is a doctor, and she's engaged to this man, about to marry him, and this man also has a child, so she's about to be a stepmom. One day she ran into somebody from her past, and it's actually her old neighbor in a house that her dad purchased when she was little. So the story kind of like talks about the present moment versus past moment. So past being like when she was growing up, so she actually lost her mom, and so when she lost her mom, her dad and her like somehow bought a house outside of the city, so outside of the San Francisco city area. I can't remember the name of the town, but they have like a really cozy sort of like cabin, and they go there during the summer to like escape. So this girl, the book is called Love and Other Words because she loves to read. She's like an avid reader. And when she was little, when they would go to this house during summer, the room that she stays in that house, there's like a little closet, and there's like, that's kind of like a library. So she met the boy, one of the boys that lives in the next house, which is the Petropoulos family, Petropoulos kids. So him and this guy, they spend basically their entire summer together reading books. He introduces her to like new books and vice versa, and they have a lot of things in common. So that's kind of like the story. It's about them, right? And then it's about like her kind of like navigating through like the loss of her mom, and then living with a dad, and the dad's trying to like navigate you know, parenting without the mom and all of that. So that was really interesting. And then in the present moment, it talks about like her and her relationship with her now fiance, and how she was kind of like rekindled with her old neighbor Elliot. So it's really interesting in the sense, I mean, you can kind of like understand or like predict like what's gonna happen, but yeah, it was an okay book. It was an okay book, an okay story. There's some sad moments in there, I have to say. So yeah, I do recommend reading it. It's not like the best book that I've read, but worth reading. All right, so book number 15, guys, is The Guncle by Stephen Rowley. So I read this as an audiobook, and the author, Stephen Rowley, is the guy who narrated the book, and it was so good. I love this book so much. I especially loved it in the Audible version because of how he narrated it. So the story is basically about this guy. He is a retired actor. He lives in Palm Springs, and out of the blue one day he found himself being the caretaker of his two kids, his niece and his nephew, because the kid's mom passed away. So in this sense, you can imagine that he is their gay uncle, so that's why he's called the Guncle. And the way he like takes care of these kids are completely different than like any other like any other person would take care of kids. And you know, it was really interesting in the sense that like he never really wanted kids, but then he kind of like, of course, as you would predict, like fall in love with his niece and nephew. So it talks about their entire summer together basically, and the nephew has a lisp when he talks. So whenever the narrator like talks about the nephew, like he's speaking with a lisp too. So it was super entertaining, and it was such a good book. It was really, really sad as well, but sad in a feel-good moment because there was like a happy outcome in the end. So yeah, it was really, really good. I do recommend reading it, or if you want to try an audiobook out of this entire video, I definitely do recommend reading Guncle or like listening to Guncle on audio because it is just so good. 5 out of 5. So the next book is also an audiobook. Guys, I did a lot of audiobooks this year, like who am I? Then the next one is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and what another great book. Like, I get the hype. This book was so good. I loved it so much. And the narrator is Julie Whelan, and Julie Whelan is such an amazing narrator. Like, she can narrate in so many different voices or characters. It's just amazing how good of a narrator she is. The first book that I listened to by her is Gone Girl, and it was like mind-blowing. It's just amazing. But this book is no less, guys. If you have seen Malibu Rising all over TikTok and everybody's saying it's like a really good book, definitely believe the hype because it's actually really good, especially if you loved The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and if you loved Daisy Jones and the Six. You know, it kind of has that same sort of like storyline about like famous people and their drama filled lives. So this book is nothing short of that. Actually, this book is based off of one of Evelyn's husbands in The Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is Mick Riva, and it's about Mick Riva and the Riva's kids essentially. So it's a story about that, and it's a story about how Mick Riva is like really popular, I think he's like a singer, yeah, singer or actor, and how he just could not hold down his marriage and basically left the wife and the kids were like left to like take care of themselves like growing up, and they don't know anything about their dad. So it has a lot of like daddy issues type of stories in here, but it was in a good way. And each of the kids, you would like fall in love with each of the kids' characters, and you know, like each of them have their own like struggles and everything, and it just comes together like beautifully. And oh my gosh, I loved it so much. So another book that I'm reading right now is actually based off of this book, which is Carrie Soto is Back. So yeah, there's a connection there too. I like how her books, Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, are kind of like connected that way. Connected in the sense that like the characters are connected, but totally complete different storylines. So you don't have to read one book to understand the other. It's just connected in that sort of manner. So that was really interesting. Again, recommend listening to it if you don't want to actually read it. It is a fast listen to, which is great. So 5 out of 5. The next book that I read is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. So I think I mentioned this book in one of my other vlogs, but for the purpose of this video, I thought this book was a-okay. It has a lot of sex scenes in here, and I'm saying that because my son's right there. I actually don't mind those scenes, but it was just like too much sometimes. I feel like, yes, I get it, like you're doing that, like it's amazing, it's like passionate, etc., but like I just thought it was too much. But yeah, this is a STEM-based romance novel. Actually, Ali Hazelwood writes a lot of STEM-based romance novels. The reason why I got this book is because I read her other book, which is Love, The Love Hypothesis, which I thought was really, really good. I bought this book, but this one was a-okay. This one has a enemy to love prose. Is that what they call it? Enemy to friends prose, or something like that. And yeah, it was interesting in that sense. Yeah, so basically the story is about this scientist. Her name is B. Konigswasser. She's, I don't know what ethnicity she is, but she got a special project where she had to work at NASA on a special like brain helmet that they're designing for like astronauts, right? So a lot of like, yeah, there's a lot of connection because of that Oprah book, The Brain and everything. So she got a little grant to work on the special projects, and then over there she met one of her colleagues from undergrad, I feel like undergrad or like postgrad or something like that. And this person, his name is Levi, he was basically like an asshole douchebag kind of person, like very mean to her, and like she's trying to understand like, why do you hate me so much? Is it because I have like a pierced septum or like have purple hair, and try to figure out that way. But they were basically, of course, what were they tasked to do is to work together. So yeah, it was not a bad book. It was cutesy, so, but it's not really like memorable in that sense. So it's all right. I gave it like a 3.5 stars for this one. Okay, moving on to book number 18 of the year. This one is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. And you guys, I love this book so much. It was so good, and coincidentally this is also kind of like about a scientist just like this one, but this is about, what's her name? I always forget the names. Oh yeah, Zott, Elizabeth Zott. It's about Elizabeth Zott and how she is a chemist and she's super ambitious. This is back in like, I think I want to say like 60s or 70s, somewhere around there, where like there's not a lot of women in chemistry, in science, basically, who have like really good careers. So she was like bullied a lot. So if you're like a feminist and like really big on like feminism movement and stuff like that, this is like actually a really good book about that, because like she really redefined the norms. So she's really bullish in the sense like she kind of like redefined norms back in the days. So this story is actually about her and her life, how she ended up being a cooking show host instead of being a chemistry teacher. And it's just really interesting how she went from that to this, and why, like the what happened in between there. It's really good. And then also in the end, she was still able to tie cooking to chemistry as well and still make an impact to the world. And yeah, it was just such a feel-good book towards the end. I really did enjoy it. And I'm actually gonna try to like watch the series now because I hear so many good things about it. So yeah, that's Lessons in Chemistry, 5 out of 5. So this is book number 19, guys, and it's called A Man Called Of by Fredrik Backman. And this book, I love it. I love it. I want to give him a hug. I want to give him a hug. It is such a good book. It's a story about a man called Of, right? And it's about how he basically is grieving the loss of his wife, and he felt like his life is over, and he is really trying to unalive himself, okay? But he just can't do it because of a lot of things that happen, because of the neighbors that just moved into his neighborhood. And he's just kind of like this like really grumpy old man. If you think about a grumpy old man, then you think about Of, because they have like a very similar characteristics. And yeah, it's basically about him trying to get things done before he moves on to the next chapter in his life. And along the lines of like that present moment, there's a lot of flashback around like him and his wife in the past, and how much he really loved her, and how they met, how he became the way he is. Yeah, it is such a good book. I really loved it so much. And again, this was such an easy read as well, like very to the point, flows really nicely, which I appreciated. And then guys, this is also now a Netflix movie, which I watched also, and I really liked the Netflix version and the book. Very close, very similar to one another. The only difference is that the Netflix version, the name is called Otto, like A Man Called Otto. And this one is like, he is like Swedish or something like that, but the Otto, the TV version, is American. So that's the difference there. But everything else in the book, the details wise, is pretty on point. So yeah, 5 out of 5. And then guys, last book of the year that I read, it was actually a book that I rented from the library, and it's called Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi. This one was really good, guys. I gave it a 4-star because it just didn't really have everything that I was looking for in like a 5-star book, but it was such a good story in the sense that it's about this woman. She's African, or she's from Ghana, and she is also a researcher, a biologist of some sort, also like women in science. And so she was doing a study about reward behavior. There are a lot of like traumatic events that happened in her life. Her brother died, and she's dealing with her mom, who is clinically depressed, and she was raised in the church. She was raised in the church in Alabama, and so she was always taught to be a believer, like a religious person, and to like turn to God. But then she actually starts contradicting everything that she learned in her belief system because she's a scientist, right? So a lot of times, like the stuff that she learned in the church, she's trying to validate that against like truths of science, and there's just that friction there. But all in all, she's really trying to understand this reward like behavior to better understand this traumatic event that happened in her life. And it was sad. It was really sad in that sense. So yeah, but that one I gave it a 4-star, and it was a really good read, so I do recommend it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that book. Whew. Oh my gosh, guys, I thought that was gonna take like a shorter time, but 20 books is a lot of books. So I'm glad I kind of went through everything. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this format, and I hope I was coherent when I was explaining the books, because sometimes when I explain things, I feel like I'm all over the place, especially when I'm just like freely recording this. But yeah, I actually, now that after going through all of these books, I actually do feel like I've read a few books that I really loved in 2023. I really like this. I love the Prince Harry book. That was really good. This one was really good. And then my audiobooks selection this year were really good as well. I really liked Malibu Rising. Guncle was really good. And then the Patchett book was also good, but it was a little bit slower because it took me a long time to go through it. But yeah, out of all of the audiobooks that I read, I think the ones that I enjoyed the most were Malibu Rising and the Guncle. So all in all, not a bad year of reading, not a bad year of books. My goal is to continue to read more books in 2024. And yeah, let me know if you guys kind of like this format. Do you like it if I share my reviews like per month or like every other month or something like that? Or do you like me to just put the reviews like in my vlogs? Let me know down below. And if you guys have any suggestions around what books I should read, or if there's a good book that you read last year that you really enjoyed, just drop it in the comments. I'm always up for like reading new books, and I always get my books based on recommendations. So yeah, if you have anything, just leave it in the comments. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you all for watching. I will catch you all in the next video. Bye.